So, I mean, technically, some people will go buy a ladder and a chainsaw and call themselves an arborist. But I like to take it quite a few steps further than that.
Of course.
I have all the proper climbing gear. Some would say I have too much climbing gear and stuff that I wouldn't need, but I find a use for every piece of equipment that I have to make sure I have many options once I'm even up in the tree.
Welcome to Proudly Dufferin. My name is Priya. I'm a realtor and a big believer in the local community and whatever the community has to offer. And today I have with me Nicholas from GoodFeller Tree Care.
Nice to meet you, Priya.
Same here. Can you introduce yourself, Nick, and tell everybody what is it that you do?
Yes. So I've been an arborist for nearly a decade now. I went to school for this way back in the day, and we studied the science behind trees and how they grow, and then the methods of climbing them and piecing them apart over complex situations such as houses, and let's say there's a shed underneath, things like that. Like we did urban arboriculture was the name of the program, and that's my specialty. I love working with clients on their own properties, figuring out what their goals are in terms of their tree care and even landscaping and things like that. So, and then I formulate a game plan, and we go ahead and execute, and I'm very proficient at it. So it's been my love and my passion for many years now, and I'm operating my business full time, and I get to go around and meet people and see like different properties and what we can make them into. So it's really fun.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I thought, and with all due respect, I thought to cut the tree, all you need to have is a ladder and a chainsaw.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, technically, some people will go buy a ladder and a chainsaw and call themselves an arborist. But I like to take it quite a few steps further than that.
Of course.
I have all the proper climbing gear. Some would say I have too much climbing gear and stuff that I wouldn't need, but I find a use for every piece of equipment that I have to make sure I have many options once I'm even up in the tree. Sometimes I'll even change up the game plan. I'll say, you know what, I think that I'd end up doing this or this, and then by the time I'm up in the tree, you see it from a different angle, and you realize, okay, well, maybe we should do this instead. And that's something I love about the work, is that it builds up my ability to adapt to situations and overcome them with safety in mind, and obviously we got to avoid all the obstacles and whatnot. So it's really fun making it work. But yeah, like I use all the harness and the ropes, and we sometimes we'll even we could set a rope in a tree from the ground and use one tree as like almost like a crane, so to speak, for another tree. And I know all the methods to tie this even from the ground, and then just make the cut from the ground, and it's amazing what we can pull off.
Yeah. It sounds amazing. Is this all that you have learned from that course?
So a lot of it I learned in the course, like the physics behind it all and the equipment involved. But also over the years working in the field, I've refined and improved on my knowledge base and applied it especially. And I'd say over the years working in this industry, I've built up my abilities to tackle larger and more precarious jobs in very complicated situations. And I have yet to have a single insurance claim necessary.
Wonderful.
I don't really mess up at all, and I make it all work out really smooth. So I'd say I think when I first started my business, it must have been about 7 years now ago. It was at the point where I decided, you know what, every question that the clients are asking me on the job sites, I could answer with confidence, and I said, you know, I could handle all these jobs. Why not build a business doing this? And that's what I did, and I've been running it ever since.
So were you interested in trees from since childhood, or it's just something you developed, or you just were thrown into it?
That's a good question. I'd say like as a kid, I used to always love climbing trees, like especially my front yard tree. I grew up here in Orangeville, and I was climbing the front yard tree so much that my dad actually decided to. My nickname was Monkey Boy. He'd call me Monkey Boy, and I didn't know that the career as an arborist was an option, and I didn't find out about it really until I was already in college to become a pilot.
Nice.
And that was up in Thunder Bay. And now how I switched courses and ended up in this career is while I was in school for piloting, that was in Thunder Bay, and there's a mountain out there called Mount McKay, and I saw it and I'm like, I really want to climb it. And I climbed it without experience or equipment, and I really pushed my limits, and I was solo. It was what you'd call a free solo climb. And after that, I said, you know what, whatever feeling I get from climbing, I want that every day if I can.
Yeah.
And so I Googled jobs that involve climbing, and arborist was one of them. And that's the one I ended up going with. And I ended up dropping out of my program to become a pilot so that I could pursue studying how to become a professional arborist. And I'm really glad I did. Although I still want to fly planes, and
That's so wonderful.
that's another thing.
Yeah, so that was your passion all along.
Yeah.
Do your parents still call you Monkey Boy?
No, that's they just use my name. So I mean that's kind of phased out, but I mean.
Did you ever think of putting that in your branding?
No, I actually haven't thought of that, but yeah, Monkey Boy Tree Care or something. We're already with the GoodFeller now, so it's a little late for that.
Yeah, I mean, not as in your name, but use it in your marketing.
Yeah. We could say I've been always referred to as Monkey Boy from a kid. Yeah,
Monkey Boy tried to get into piloting, but then ended up being an arborist.
Ended up being a monkey anyway. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Once a monkey, always a monkey.
You can't keep a monkey in a cockpit of a plane for life.
Yeah.
You know, I had to be in the trees. So
yeah. Or maybe once a monkey, always a monkey.
Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah.
Alrighty. So, what kind of people you work with? Is it in a subdivision, more on a rural properties?
It's a whole host of different properties and types. I mean, I really enjoy the residential work, like people who have trees around their house that they want to maintain, and if they have a backyard that they want to make it into their own oasis. Everybody has their own ideas of what their oasis is. But sometimes the trees, they keep growing in the way of that, and they got to be maintained and pruned, and so that's what I really enjoy. But at the same time, I've contracted my work out to like a gold exploration company, Signature Resources. They have a project way up north in northern Ontario, far beyond. It was about twice the distance out from where we are to Thunder Bay. So just way out there. There's no roads or anything, and it was helicopter access. So very interesting work out there. Yeah, we would take a couple flights, and we land and there's an indigenous community, Red Sucker Lake, and then we would take a helicopter or a float plane, and everything that we did there, we had to fly the materials in by helicopter and put everything together, and I was in charge of making sure that all of the camp had firewood to keep us warm through the winter, and it was in -40 degrees, and I'd be riding a snowmobile with a sled and loading it full of wood, and then bringing it back and splitting it, and then still cutting all the trails so that we can move big equipment to drill to find out where is the gold on the property. So I mean, anything from residential to that, I do it all, and I loved it. I've even done like crane removals where we have a crane up over a house and we take big parts of the tree out from over the house, you know, things like that. So a whole variety. I mean, as far as like line clearance work, I do that residentially. Like I don't do city contracts just yet, but that's something we're going to be pushing into eventually. But yeah, I'm very open to what types of jobs I take on.
So what is the most challenging work you have done so far?
The most challenging work I've done so far, I'd say, is the larger trees that are up above like many obstacles. Let's say somebody bought a house and they said, I want a pool. And they go ahead and they put in the pool and they build a gazebo and a shed. And then they get all these garden ornaments. And then they have their house extension that they added. So the backyard becomes very tight. And a lot of times there's some big trees around that area. And they don't give it enough thought of how is that tree gonna come down. So eventually it's pointed out to them that this is an issue, and then it's my responsibility to make sure it all comes down smoothly without damaging all these things that they've put into their yard. So using like ropes and pulleys and all these, I could go on and on naming all the different gear, but making sure that everything comes down safely, is cut up and hauled away without causing any damage. That's a very complicated process, but that's what I went to school for, and I love doing it. I mean, I'd say there's all different types of complications on jobs, and that's one area.
It all sounds very interesting to me. Is it very interesting when you're doing it?
I love it. Yeah, it's so much fun. I'd say it's a very dangerous job too. It's equally as fun as it is scary and dangerous. And I've always been a bit of what you'd call an adrenaline junkie, I guess. I really like pushing my limits and feeling like, oh, can I pull this off? And then going ahead and doing it. So like my job provides that all the time. And it's I would consider it almost like a muscle that you have to exercise, is pushing your limits. And it allows, I'd say a benefit I'll just mention really quick is that my day-to-day stress levels for the smaller things in life, they don't nearly reach the levels of what I have to deal with at work. So it's very healthy, I'd say.
Yeah. Let's say if I can pull out a big tree,
yeah,
this is nothing.
Exactly. Yeah. Like what's a line up for groceries when you got a huge tree you got to dismantle the same day and make sure it all goes smooth, right?
So when you get the tree, as you mentioned, it's so close to the house extension. When you take it out, at that point, do you rehome a tree, or is it just gone?
So, I mean, there are options to rehome trees. Now, the larger that they get, it's a lot harder to pull off, because when you're moving a tree, you often need to dig out the ground around it, around the roots as well. But when a tree gets so old that it exceeds the area that you can excavate and pull out and move, you're damaging that root zone. So there comes a time when the tree's been in for too long that it either needs to be managed where it is or removed entirely, piece by piece, at which point that's the end of that tree's life. So there are options for moving trees and planting new ones that we obviously explore, and we do provide that service. But sometimes I get the question, can we move this tree now? And the tree's already way too big. So sometimes that can't be done. Yeah.
So when you're at a job, how do you decide if a tree has to be pruned or is just gone right now? It just has to be removed.
So I look at, I refer back to my schooling and my education there, and we learned a lot about how much can a tree take before it can't survive. And we also learn a lot about how to decipher whether it should be a removal or a pruning job. And for me, I like to tell my clients, I always like to be the surgeon before the executioner, because I could be both. I could be the surgeon or the executioner, and I'd rather save the tree if it's feasible. Yeah. Now, I also have a very good understanding and a good eye for knowing if it's past that limit and the tree is simply in decline and it's at the end of its life. And let's say, based on their goals, like if we pruned it as hard as they want it done, I will be honest with them and say, look, like if we're taking this much off your tree that you'd like, we're exceeding, let's say, for example, 30% of the canopy. Taking that off could put the tree into a state of shock. So I'm very open and honest about the impact on the tree and whether or not it's good for the tree. And that's where I like to sort of, I take the client's input of what their goals are, but then I also consider what the tree's goals are, because I speak for the trees essentially. And I like to relay that to the client and say, maybe we can meet somewhere in the middle where we don't go quite as hard on the tree as you're wanting, but it helps the tree live. And then you don't have a tree that's dying in your backyard that you need to call me to remove anyway.
Right.
So there's a lot of that. And, but yeah, I also take into consideration the roots, how close they are to the building, things like that. But I mean, I've had many people say this tree's too big and the roots are coming into the building. We have a method to mitigate that, which is like a root barrier installation, where we could trench a line along the area that they want to protect from the roots. And we install a barrier so that the tree's roots, when they hit the barrier, they divert to the sides. So it could give more options for the tree to stay in an area where otherwise it would cause severe damage to, let's say, the basement foundation wall, things like that.
So at what point should somebody do it? Let's say, from my profession, if someone's buying a house and there's a tree planted so close to the house.
Yeah.
So at some point, either the branches are gonna go into the shingles, and the second possibility is the roots growing into the foundation.
So the earlier the better, as far as pruning and shaping the tree around your structure. It's usually the earlier the better, because as the tree branches grow out over the house and we got to bring them back, we usually have to make larger cuts if it's been delayed. If the tree has been maintained over the years, what we do when we're pruning alongside a building, let's say, is we're gonna bring it back to, like, each branch that comes out, we're gonna trim it back to like lateral branches that are going out to the sides and that could sustain the life of that branch. Otherwise, you end up with too many cuts on the trunk of the tree. And that's when all these problems happen. If you have too many cuts right back to the trunk, that's where the bugs could get in, the rot could set in, and you could be faced with many problems. Now, at the same time, there are many houses that when people move in, that hasn't been really taken care of. Yeah. So that's where I can give them my honest opinion of if this tree should be removed or pruned, or whether or not a root barrier installation is an option, things like that. But many times when a house is being put up and there's decisions made to plant trees around it, sometimes it's overlooked how big is that tree gonna really get. And that's something I studied as well, is how big do the trees get, and based on each species. So I have a good idea of what is a bit too close and what's not. But what my recommendation is the sooner you get it pruned, the higher the chance that you can work with the health of the tree in a way that's healthy. And on that note, I wanted to say one other thing is, many trees, or I'd say all trees, as they grow and get older, us as humans, like, we have an ability to take care of them, almost like a doctor would or a surgeon. And like, whether it's removing dead wood, whether it's pruning just for the shape, and removing crossing or rubbing branches, things like that. These are natural formations in the tree that could be taken care of preemptively. So I'd say to anybody who has a property with trees on them, take a good look at them, see if you are seeing any dead wood, see if there's any rubbing branches, if there's branches that are growing too close to, let's say, your building or up above it, you know. These are all things that myself as an arborist, I can help work with the tree and your property to find a healthy balance so that you don't need to really lose the tree. Yeah.
So what are your top 3 tips of things that people should do to take care of their trees?
So 3 tips. I'd say the first one that comes to mind that many overlook is fertilizing. Like, deep root fertilizing is really good, because as trees grow and as the grass grows around your lawn and other plants, we usually, when we do our cleanup on our property, we're taking it all away, right? And that all comes from the ground. You need the sunlight, the water, and the nutrients for growth. So if we're constantly pulling the nutrients off of the property and getting rid of it, the soil could become depleted from that nutrients, and the end result is you get less foliage on the branches, and you get health issues and things like that. So there's deep root fertilizing as an option to help feed your trees, and many people overlook that. So that's one tip. Another tip would be, like I said, just keeping in mind the pruning that might be necessary for your trees' optimal health. And that's overlooked quite a bit. A lot of people wait until a tree needs to be removed, and that's the only arborist work that they'll hire on the property is, oh, this one's dead and this one's dead, so let's remove these ones. But also in that tip, like, you can avoid some of that by taking care of your trees. And like, that's one thing I've practiced over the years, is climbing trees without spikes on my feet, like without spurs, to get up in the canopy and hands-on approach to really improve the health of the trees. And that's my favorite thing to do, I'd say, in my job. A third one, let's just think of one here. Planting trees, like we said, think about how big is this tree gonna get before you choose where to plant it. And also, not only that, but the soil type. Trees have different preferences for soil types. Right. And if you could look ahead at that, and whether it's through your own research or you ask me to come give some tips or whatever, you could find out what trees are gonna do best on our property and where are they gonna do best. And that will reduce your troubles when it comes to taking care of them in the future.
So if someone's planting a tree today, they should take a look at the soil type, do some research on how big the tree is gonna get,
yes,
and maybe make a plan around it.
I would say so, yeah. And on that note, if there's any property developers listening to this, I'd say they are some of the first to make those decisions a lot of the time. So a lot of the times the homeowner moves in and it's already there.
There, yeah.
Right? So I'd say, yeah, like that's more of a tip for people who are really just being proactive in planting new things on the property. But the other tips are more so for the maintenance once they're already in place.
Right.
Yeah.
So just out of curiosity, if someone wants to plant a tree in their yard, how far does it have to be from the house? Just a ballpark number. So, I mean,
it depends on the tree, because there's some people, like, there's benefits to having trees close to your house in terms of reducing the amount of sunlight on the house, let's say for cooling it in the summer. You could have cedars growing really close to the house. But I also recommend, if they are really close, any of those trees, whatever they may be, that they are still maintained from rubbing on the sides and let's say the shingles and the east trough, things like that. These trees that are around your house really close, they do have benefits, but they also can be problematic if not taken care of. So there's that, but then there's larger trees, like let's say you're planting like an oak tree or a walnut tree, things like that. They need more room, and I'd suggest like at least 15 feet or so for a tree like that. And then as it's growing, any branches that are coming close, they can be maintained. And same with the root zone as well. But on that note, the earlier the better. And
so would you install a root barrier while installing a tree?
You could, yeah. I mean,
is it expensive?
It can get fairly expensive, but it's a one and done solution where once it's in there, the roots aren't going to get past it, and it provides the peace of mind that your foundation isn't going to be impacted by the roots of the trees around your house. And here, let's say in Orangeville, for example, what I notice going around Orangeville is that we have buildings where the foundations are getting slightly older, and the trees are getting older and larger. And one thing around here is that the trees aren't at their maximum nearly yet in terms of how big they'll get. There's a lot of trees that are close to buildings that will get twice the size, and they're already at a size that could be problematic. So
Are you talking about the trees in a subdivision?
all over town, everywhere, I'm noticing, because I have an eye for how large can a tree get. I've worked in the city where there's many old trees down in Toronto. I've worked in all different sorts of areas with different growth. And I'd say that Orangeville, one thing that stands out to me is that there's a lot of trees that were planted close to the buildings that will overgrow their space if not taken care of properly. So I'd say root barrier installations in this town, at least, they're fairly avoided, as they are somewhat expensive, but they would help quite a bit, because these trees are going to be causing issues as time goes. I'd say within the next decade, we're going to see a lot more roots growing into the basement walls and just causing damage and whatnot, which could get very expensive. So
what kind of a damage a tree can do if the roots are too close to the foundation?
So they're very strong, these roots, and you could see, many people have seen even like upheaval of their stone patios, let's say, or their stone driveway. They'll see all the bricks are out of line. It's the same with your foundation. These trees are very capable of, if they see any small crack, they could expand it and cause more water to get in, and next thing you know, you have a basement flood. So I'd say like that's a very it's a very expensive cost when it gets to that point.
Of course.
And if you look at it from a preemptive standpoint of how can we avoid this, and you compare the pricing of replacing your foundation wall or patching it up versus installing a root barrier, it's a lot cheaper to install the root barrier, and it's something that could give you that peace of mind.
Right. So does a root barrier is installed in the whole perimeter of the house or just that area?
I only recommend it in the line with where the trees are. So like if you have no large trees on one side of your house, you don't necessarily need one there. So you could have an installation put just on the side where you have your largest trees that would cause these issues. Some trees, they don't pose much issue at all in terms of the foundation, because their root zone is a lot smaller. But when it comes to the larger trees, which we have quite a few of around here, those trees I do recommend, if they are getting close, that you put in a root barrier. I was just discussing, there's a golf course that I take care of nearby here, and they have roots growing under the golf green, and they want the golf green to be nice and smooth and flat. And what they've been doing is they've been cutting back the roots, but that's a year after year repeat process.
Is it healthy for the tree?
You could do root pruning it's similar to pruning of the canopy. It could be managed properly and safely for the tree. But on the note that I was saying there is that if they do the cutting back, they're going to have to do it again and again, unless they put in a barrier that's going to help divert those roots. And also if those roots are left to grow but out to the sides, it still allows the nutrient absorption of those roots instead of having to cut them off.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a healthy option.
Would just go elsewhere?
Yeah, so the root barriers, once they grow into it, it's a barrier that deflects them out to the sides and back. So they look for the soil on this side of the barrier, and not the side where your house foundation is, or let's say your golf green,
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and there's many things that like there's the foundation, there's things like what I just mentioned, but there's also, let's say you have like a pool, things like, there's many reasons to get that installed, but it's something that I've noticed in my time doing this, that it's very it's not offered much by many companies. I've worked for quite a few different arborist companies in my past of my career, and not one of them that I worked for offered this as a service. So it's very, it's one of those hidden services that many don't think about, but it can fix a lot of the issues that we're going to be facing over these years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's something I'm happy to offer.
Right. So, since you said we have a lot of trees that you see around here, which could create problems within the next decade or so, what can we do together as a community to help these people?
I would say awareness is key. A lot of people, like even myself, I told you I didn't know that this was a career until I was already in college for
Yes.
something else. So
And I didn't know you can go to college to be an arborist.
yeah. So I'd say like just improving the knowledge of the maintenance of your trees and the options that you have with that is very key. Like I didn't know that there were people until I was in college that climb and maintain as a living these trees, but the benefits are huge, and especially as a property owner, the canopy around you, like many people will complain that it's dropping dead branches. If there's branches that are falling out of your tree that are dead, there's a good chance there's more that haven't fallen. And also, like every dead branch that isn't pruned and removed, it's a good entrance point for bugs and boring beetles and things like this that could really turn it from just a normal process in the health of the tree into something that's fatal for the tree. So also there's like airflow through the tree. You know, if you do like the thinning pruning to thin out some of those branches, you could get more airflow, which increases the strength of the remaining limbs because they get a little more exercise in the wind. So these are all things that can really help. And a lot of these things, many people aren't privy to, and they don't know that these are options. So I'd say the first thing is just increasing the knowledge of the community of the ways that they could take care of their trees. Yeah.
Right, and some of the ways you've already mentioned. How
Yeah.
they can,
Yeah, so there's many ways, and even like elevation pruning. I notice a lot of homeowners, they take it upon themselves to do the lower cuts of the tree because they get in the way when they mow their lawn or they're doing their gardening, right? So they say, oh, this branch is so annoying, and they go and cut it off. But I think knowing the proper pruning method is also key. Like, it's one thing to cut the branch off and leave a stub, but it's another to make a proper pruning cut that allows the tree to seal over properly. Because trees, they don't heal necessarily. They seal, or it's called compartmentalization. So there's a layer underneath the bark of the tree called the cambium layer. And if you make a pruning cut that's too far out, you leave a wooden stub, and the cambium layer is gonna try to overgrow that stub. It's gonna try to go all the way out over it, and it usually can't. And by then, the rot is already setting in, the bugs are getting into the tree, and then more problems occur. If you cut it too far in to the tree, you're severing that cambium layer, the source of the healing, or the sealing rather. And so there's a happy medium, and there's a proper angle for every cut. And that's what I learned in school, and that's something that is out there on the internet for many to learn. So I'd say another piece of advice I have for people is, if you want to take it into your own hands to prune your tree, which I recommend, you know, I can't get to all of them, right? I'd say do a little bit of research on the proper pruning methods so that you can ensure that when you do make these cuts, that they're also beneficial for the tree as well, instead of just your clearance for your lawn mowing or gardening.
And is there enough information available on YouTube?
I would say so. Yeah, every year there's more arborists posting videos and tree specialists that post the information out there. So if people would like to be proactive, that's something they could do. But I also want to stress that it is a very dangerous process depending on the size of the limbs and things like that. And like you said, like some people could get a ladder and a chainsaw and make cuts, but they also need to consider there's many unseen hazards in that process as well. And many of the injuries that happen in tree work happen on a ladder with a pole saw, cutting a branch, and it swings in and it hits the ladder, they fall off. We hear about that all the time. And for myself, I rarely ever use a ladder, to be honest. I do this for a living, and it's rare that I ever bring a ladder with me on a job site. That's because I have the ropes to access the tree, and with my harness and my rope, I can be tied up way high in the tree and go throughout the whole canopy. And if anything touches my rope underneath me, I'm fine. Whereas if I was on the ladder and something hits the ladder underneath me, I might not be fine.
Yeah.
So, and that rope allows a lot cleaner access of the tree. And
do you wear helmets and stuff?
yeah, I wear all the proper gear. PPE, like the personal protective equipment, all that. We wear hearing protection, and I wear a helmet that allows me to flip down a screen visor around my face. It's a metal visor, so even if a branch wants to tap me in the face, I'm protected. Yeah, so I have that, and I also have many years experience doing this to know what will happen. Well, not know what will happen, but have a good idea. Yeah. And as you do this for many years, you get better and better at basically simulating what will happen in your mind and then seeing it happen.
Possibilities of what things that could go wrong.
Yes, yeah. And like with every cut that I make in a tree, every notch that I put in to the tree, all the angles of everything, it's all calculated. And I do it very quickly. So it may look easy, but there's a lot going on up here when I'm doing this to make sure everything goes smooth. And that includes like the angle of the rope that holds the branch that I'm cutting over a house. Where is it gonna swing and how heavy is it? You know, and that's also based on my knowledge of different woods and different trees. I know how much each branch of different species flexes, how heavy is it, how fragile is it, you know? If there's a dead tree, I'm an expert in figuring out how high up into this dead tree can I climb before it's too risky, right? But that brings me back to the note that it's the highest death rate job worldwide, doing what I do, and it's no joke, this stuff. It's very, and many people, they say, oh, I could do it, you know, and all the power to them, you know, but just, I recommend that they do a lot of research, because it's easy to overlook just how many hazards are at play.
Educate themselves.
Yes, yeah.
So when you do work with clients, do you, is it a one-time job or is there a contract involved?
So there's many times where we do repeat work for clients. There's times where it's one and done. Let's say some people, it's the only problem tree on their property, and once we take care of it, we're good to go. And maybe they'll call me 5 years down the road if there's another. But for the most part, it's a good mix, I'd say. What I love is doing repeat pruning jobs, because it's almost like a doctor's visit for your tree.
Yeah.
And if through your whole life you only had one doctor visit, you might not be as healthy as if you had some repeat visits with your doctor. So it's the same with me and the trees. The properties that benefit the most are the ones who are preemptive in their approach with their tree and saying, how can we stay on top of the health of this? And the end result is it's just a beautiful canopy. The tree is really thriving. You know, and every time I'll show up to these properties, I always provide like a free consultation of what are my recommendations and things like that. Even if it's a job where, let's say I've been there 5 times doing pruning, I don't just assume, okay, we're gonna show up and do this for work. I like to make a first stop visit and we go over the property, do an evaluation. We see what are the updates in the health of your trees, what's new that's growing around them, things like that. And then we reformulate our game plan every time that I come to the site. And that part is free of charge. And I love doing that, honestly.
The consultation is free.
Yes, yeah, it's free consultations and free estimates, free quotes, you know. And I always stand by my pricing. I don't switch it up at the last minute. Of course, there could be additions in the work, and that's the only time that we'll alter the pricing, but that's all within fairness, and it's all explained to the client as we go. But yeah, it's that's one of my favorite parts, is just going to the property and discussing the health of the trees and answering any questions people have about how things work and what's their best options and things like that.
That's good. Yeah. So how often should people prune the tree, and what's the best time of the year to prune a tree?
So the optimal time for the health of the tree is usually for pruning in the dormant periods, like what we're entering now, where what happens is once we go below 0 Celsius is the water in the trees goes into the ground. And at this point, there's no growth in the tree. It goes dormant, like it's asleep. We could see the canopy better because the leaves have dropped. This is the optimal time. However, people will prune all through the year. And like I've worked for, in the past, the world's largest residential tree care company, and they have their own laboratory and everything. And this company was having me prune all sorts of trees all times of the year. And what I have gathered from all my work doing this is that the only time that you really need to be worried about the timing of the pruning is if you're doing a harder pruning on the tree. Like if you're going really hard on a tree that's overgrown a space and you're nearing that 30% canopy reduction mark, which is common, it happens, the best time would be more in the dormant period. And but when it comes to just regular maintenance of your tree, especially deadwooding could happen anytime.
Deadwooding.
So deadwooding is when you have dead branches in your tree. That branch, as soon as it dies, is not serving the tree any good purpose, and its removal will not hurt the tree in any way. It's only going to help, like I explained, the compartmentalization process. That's going to be sped up, and it's going to be like optimal for the tree to get that dead wood out immediately. So I wouldn't suggest waiting on any pruning that is involving deadwooding. And even when it comes to some thinning, elevation cuts where we lift up the canopy so you could get underneath it, minor pruning work that's within that 30% range can happen all times a year. But if you're looking at doing like a more heavy pruning job on your tree, then winter would be optimal because that's when the tree is dormant and it's it's able to handle that stress a lot better. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. The tree is sleeping and you're...
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, you took care of it.
Yeah, that's and many people ask if I provide my service through the winter. I do, and I've for all the years I've done this. One thing I pride myself in is being out there in the tree in all kinds of weather.
Is there any last pieces of advice that you would like to give to our listeners?
I would say the last piece of advice is to really look at your trees like a living, breathing organism. And when we look at them through that lens, we really see something that we can maybe help along its journey and taking care of it, as opposed to it being just a physical object in your backyard or front yard. They do so much for us, and I think that it's really good that we have the opportunity to do something for them.
Right.
And many people talk about their trees in a way as though they were a physical object that they don't really care about. But I'd say the ones who really look at them like they're a living, breathing thing, just like we are, it puts them into a different mindset in terms of taking care of them. And that's one of the things I learned in my schooling, was just how similar to us they are in many ways. There's like down to the mitochondria of the cell, the powerhouse of the cell. We have something in us called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. It's what leads to every muscle contraction and movement that we make. And just an interesting fact here is that it's identical, the ATP in the mitochondria of the tree cells as it is to ours.
Interesting.
It looks like a little motor that spins, and it takes nutrients and turns it into action, essentially. Trees have this identical to us, and that was one of the things I learned about 5 years into my career. But before my career even began, when I was in schooling, I was already learning how amazing these things are, these trees around us, and how similar to us that they are.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important that we see them for what they are. And I mean, a doctor's visit or an arborist's visit is very helpful.
Yeah.
I would say it's necessary and very helpful for the tree. And if you care for your trees and you see them like this, then I'm sure you'd want more to take care of them, I'd say.
Right. Well, yeah, I think a part of the problem is that we as humans have been disconnected from the nature.
Yes, yeah.
And again, not to question people's choices and to each their own.
Yeah.
You would have seen around where people have gotten rid of the grass to have more parking.
Yes.
It's more and more concrete now.
Yeah, and you got to think about the roots, availability for the soil and the nutrients and whatnot. So yeah, that's something that I think is overlooked quite a bit, and they expect, well, it's a tree, it's gonna grow fine.
Exactly.
It's a living thing.
It's a tree.
It's a living
Just
thing.
like it's a child, it's gonna grow.
Yes, right. And I mean, any person who wants to stay healthy, they'll stay on top of doctors' visits and things like this. So it's the same with trees. And if you skip all your doctor's visit for your trees or your arborist visits, you're probably gonna have an unhealthy tree. And that brings me back to the one last point is it's every tree, by the time it becomes, let's say, adolescent or like a teenager of a tree, it's gonna have a little bit of dead wood. It'll have some overcrowding of branches. Some of the branches will be so low that you can't walk underneath it, right? Yeah. So maybe its shape is not working with your property in the way that you would hope. So the sooner you schedule an arborist visit and schedule the work to be done to maintain that tree, the healthier that tree will be, and the better that tree will respond to you cutting it, essentially. Right. If you work with it over time as opposed to a one and done solution, which many people like to go for, you're gonna have a lot more success in maintenance of your trees long term. If you look at it from a lens of it's something that you should stay on top of year after year. And then that brings me into the hedge trimming, you know, like if somebody says, how do I make my hedge look really nice? I mean, twice yearly trims, like one in the spring and one in the fall, that's pretty optimal. Some people will wait 2 years and 2 years, but what they're doing is they're going really hard on the branches and they end up with not as lush of a hedge. And the same applies to all trees, you know, that you want to stay on top of it. And that's why my free consultations and estimate come in handy, because at any point anybody could call me and say, hey, can we get you over here on our property and let's
just give your advice.
And even if they don't want to book a service, I'm happy to give recommendations, even if they want to either hire somebody else or take care of it themselves. I'm happy to do that. But I would recommend people book a free consultation or an estimate with GoodFeller Tree Care.
Perfect. Yeah. And of course, I think you are pretty amazing at whatever you do.
Thank you.
With all the education and, you know, whatever you've just told us, that was a wealth of information. What is one thing that you want to see people doing with their trees?
I would say, just if there's one thing, you know, just appreciate it. Essentially, give it some appreciation, because it's like a pet of yours. It's almost like a pet or a neighbor. You know, or it's part of your family because it lives with you, right? So just really see it for that, and part of giving it that appreciation is taking care of it, because we have the tools and the hands to do so. So if we neglect it, it could be sad, you know, sometimes for the tree.
Right,
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Nick. It was amazing conversation.
Thank you,
For our
Priya.
listeners who want to contact you, where can we find you?
Yeah, you can find me. My website is GoodFeller.ca. That's GoodFeller.ca.
I'll put that in the description box.
Yeah, and we have Instagram as well. That's GoodFeller Tree Care on Instagram. On Facebook, it's GoodFeller Tree Care Ontario. My number is 519-215-6788. And I think that about covers the contact information. And if you reach out to me, just let me know a brief description of what it is you're looking for. And if you provide address and the best number I could reach you at, I'll give you a call back and I'll let you know when I could stop by to your property. And as far as the distance that we go for that, like I do estimates down in Toronto, even from here in Orangeville. I go fairly far. And I mean, if there's even work in other provinces or countries, I'm open to it as well. I do a lot of traveling for work that way as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And we're based out of Orangeville, just so you know. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. That was really great chatting with
Thank you.
and thank you so much for taking care of our trees.
You're welcome. You're welcome. It's my pleasure.